So this is still 4.2. All right, this is still section 4.2. So we have to find the number of possible. So the possible real, positive, and negative real roots. So to do that, the formula is plus or minus P over Q. I'm going to go ahead and take off B for right now. So what you have to do is list all the factors of P and divide that by all of the factors of Q. So for this example, the P is always going to be your constant. So this is P. Q, so P is your constant. And Q is the leading coefficient. So in this example, Q would be what? Which one of those numbers is Q? 3. Okay, so all you're going to do is list your factors of P. So what are the numbers that will divide into P? So what two numbers? There's only 2 factors of 3. And what are those factors? 1 and 3. And then Q also only has, because Q is 3, there's only 2 factors, 1 and 3. So what you're going to do is to find your possible roots. And a root is the same thing as a 0. You're going to take plus or minus 1 and plus and minus 3 and divide that by the factors of Q. So we would have, if you take 1, let's start with this one, 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1, so plus and minus 1 would be your first root. And now you take that 1 and you divide it by 3. So 1 divided by 3 would be 1/3. And now let's do the same thing with the 3. You take the 3 and you divide that by 1. What's 3 divided by 1? 3. And then you take the 3 and divide it by 3. And what's 3 divided by 3? And we already have 1, so we don't have to list that twice. So those would be your possible roots. All right, let's look at example B. So for example B, again, we're going to take P. What is P? P is 7. And what's Q? 1. So that's actually a lot easier because the only numbers that go into 7 are 1 and 7. And we're going to divide that by 1. So your possible roots would be plus or minus 1 divided by 1, which is 1. And 7 divided by 1, which is just 7. So that would be your possible roots. Let's do another one, though, because I feel like those were a little bit too easy. So there is a question on the quiz where you just have to tell me the possible roots. And then we get into actually finding the real roots. So these are just the possibilities. So we'll know which ones to try. Okay, let's try. Go ahead and copy this down. We're going to do some more of these. These are the same examples. So we're going to list the possible roots. Just go ahead. You don't have to write this part because you already have this part down. But copy down A and then copy down B. These are a little harder, so this is a little bit better to do because there's a lot more possibilities. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this. So what would be our P? P is the constant, so what's P? P is 6. Now you kind of ignore the negative part because the factors of 6 and the factors of -6 are the same. So we're going to list, so we have 6. Now, what are the factors of 6? What numbers will go into 6? 1, 2, what else? 3 and 6. Okay, what's Q? Q is 2. And what are the factors of 2? 1 and 2. All right, so now to find your possibility. So again, these are just the possible roots. The possible roots are P over Q. So I want you to start with this first 1. Take all of these numbers, all 4 of these numbers, and divide it by 1. Now, when you divide 1, 2, 3, and 6 by 1, you get the same number, right? Because anything divided by 1 is itself. I see so many earbuds and phones out right now, but I'm not even going to say nothing. Just please don't say anything if you have a bad grade and you on your phone. Just don't. All right, now we're going to take these same 4 numbers and divide them by 2. Now, when you divide it by 2, though, you're going to get some duplicates. So when we take 1 over 2, well, that's something new. That's 1/2. But when you take 2 divided by 2, what is 2 divided by 2? See, we already have that listed, so we don't have to write that. And then 3 divided by 2, well, that's a new one. But what about 6 divided by 2? What's 6 divided by 2? And we already have that. So this will be my list of possible roots. And that's all of them. You do not repeat. All right, let's go ahead and do this last one, B together. Now this is going to have a lot of possibilities. So I'll give you a minute to copy down A because I'm going to need a lot more space to do B. Does anybody need more time to copy A? All right. So, because 10 and 12 have a lot of factors, so that's why I need a lot of space. So I'm going to write it on top so that people can see. All right, so what is, in this example, for B, what is P? 12. 12 has a lot of factors, so factors of 12 would be 1, 2, what else? 3, 4, 6, and 12. Okay. And what's Q? 10. All right. Factors of 10 would be 1, 2, what else? 5 and 10. Okay. So we're going to have a lot of possibilities. So the first thing you're going to do is take these 6 numbers and you're going to start by dividing them by 1. So my possibilities, possibles, because these aren't the real ones. Because this is a 5th degree, there's 5 roots. We're only listing the possibilities, okay? So the first one, it could be positive or negative, so it'll be plus or minus 1. So I'm just taking all 6 of these numbers and I'm dividing them by 1. So plus and minus 1, plus and minus 2, plus and minus 3, plus minus 4, plus minus 6, and plus minus 12.
Can we put a bracket on those numbers and then just put plus or minus?
Technically, you're supposed to put a plus or minus in front of each one, but I would not be picky. All right, next we're going to take these same 6 numbers and divide them by 2. And we're not going to list duplicates. So 1 over 2, that's a new one. So we're going to list that one. 2 over 2 we already have because 2 divided by 2 is 1. 3 over 2 is a new one, so we'll list that. 4 over 2 we already have, so we don't have to list that. 6 divided by 2 is 3, we already have that. And 12 divided by 2 is 6. So now you're going to take these numbers and divide them by 5. So that would be plus or minus 1/5, plus or minus, so now I'm going to take the 2 over 5, the 3 over 5, the 4 over 5, 6 over 5, and 12 over 5. Those are all going to be new. And now we're finally reaching the end, which is 10. So we'll probably have some duplicates for that one. So starting with that 1 over 10. So let's list that. Now 2 over 10. Do we already have, what is 2 over 10 reduced down to? 1/5. And we already have that, so we don't have to list that again. What about 3 over 10? That doesn't reduce, so we'll put that. 4 over 10. What does 4 over 10 reduce down to? Do we already have that? Yep. What about 6 over 10? What does that reduce down to? 3/5. We already have that. And then 12 over 10 reduces down to 6/5. So that would be it. So on the test, quiz, test, whatever you want to call it, there is a question where you only have to tell me the possibilities. So now that we have listed the practice possible, let's actually try to find the real ones. So let's do an example now where we are going to find the actual roots. So go ahead, and in example 4, we're going to find the real roots. And we're going to do synthetic division to find it.
If you accidentally do a duplicate possibility on the test, you take a point off.
Not a whole point. So what degree is this? It's a 3rd degree, which means we're looking for 3 answers. So now we're actually going to find it. It's a 3rd degree, so I'm looking for 3 answers. So I always like to write that out. I know I'm looking for 3 solutions. Now we need to know the possibilities. So to figure out the possibilities, because we need to know which ones to even try. Again, we're going to do our P over Q. So what's P? P is 4. And Q is 1. So that's pretty good because we know that we don't have any fractions. So what are the numbers that will go into 4? So our factors of 4 are 1, 2, and 4. And again, the factors of 1 is just 1. So our possibilities are going to be our possible roots. And we don't know which ones they are yet. We're going to do synthetic divisions to figure that out. But the possible roots, and this is why it's important to know the possibilities, plus and minus 1, because 1 divided by 1 is 1, plus and minus 2, plus and minus 4. So in this list, there are 6 different numbers. But only 3 of these numbers, 3 are going to be the actual roots. So who remembers synthetic division from Algebra 2? You had to make a little bracket, looks like this. Multiply and add. All right, so what you want to do, let's start testing our possibilities. Let's start with a positive 1. So I always start with positive 1. Let's put a positive 1 out here. Now we're going to list our coefficients of our function. So our coefficients are 1, and then what's my next coefficient? Negative 2. What's the next coefficient? Negative 7 and negative 4. So this is how you do synthetic division. For synthetic division, you just drop down the first number. Nothing happens with that first number. And then from here, you would multiply, take this number, multiply it by our possibility, and what's 1 times 1? Put that under the negative 2. Add, what's negative 2 plus 1? Negative 1. Multiply negative 1 times 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Add negative 8. Multiply negative 8 times 1, you get negative 8. And then you see how we did not end with a 0. This has to be a 0. If this number is not a 0, that means that this is not one of my 3 answers. So we can exclude 1. 1 is not one of my roots. So we tested 1, so now let's go ahead and try negative 1. So let's do that same process again. This time we're going to put a negative 1 out here. And you try to do it by yourself. And see if you end with a 0. You always drop down the first number. And then you just multiply, add, multiply, add. Did it work? Did you end with a 0?
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead. You should have ended with a 0. So we take negative 1 times 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Put that here. You add. That would be negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. You add. You get negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. We add. We get 0. So that tells me I know one of my answers. One of my answers is negative 1. So we found 1. And to find the last 2, now we have, whenever you only have 3 numbers, now it's a quadratic. And when it's a quadratic, we have other options. That would be my A, B, and C. The first number is A. The second number is B. The third number is C. So what you have is 1x squared minus 3x minus 4. Go ahead and factor or use a quadratic formula, but it's easier to factor and get the last 2 roots. So what you're trying to do is get this down to a quadratic so we can factor it. So find your two numbers that multiply to be -4 and add to -3. So two numbers that multiply to be -4 and add to -3 would be what? -4 and what else? +1. Who got that? Go ahead and set them both equal to 0. So we get x equals 4. And then x equals -1 is a double root. Going back to the video that you should have watched, that means that it's going to bounce. It's going to touch at -1. So -1 and then +4. And these would be my 3 solutions. So I'm going to go ahead and write this in factor form. So our zeros would occur at -1, 0, -4. Well, -1, 0. I'm going to write it twice. And then +4, 0. The factors, factored form, because you may be asked to write this in factor form, would be x plus 1, x plus 1, x minus 4. And remember, if it occurs twice, you can also just say x plus 1 squared. Yes. You can. Now, you don't need to do a box method when a is 1, but we can do that. Whenever a is 1, you don't need to make a box. But if you make a box, the x squared would go here. The -4 would go here. And then your two numbers would be a -4x and a 1x. I only generally make a box if a is not 1. All right, we have time to do one more example. And again, we're going to find the actual roots. So go ahead and copy down B. Go ahead and list your possibilities for your factors. So the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. And the factors of 2 are 1 and 2. So you always want to write your possibilities. So let's go ahead and write our possibilities. And then we'll actually find what the actual 3 are. So your possible roots, not the actual, but the possible roots would be, take these 4 numbers and divide them by 1. And then you take these 4 numbers and divide them by 2. And don't write duplicates. So go ahead and do that. So we have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6. Now when you take those numbers and divide them by 2, what are your 2 additional roots that you can add? Plus and minus 1/2 and plus and minus 3/2. Who had that for their possibilities? All right, now when we do our synthetic division, I would never, ever, ever do synthetic division with a fraction. We're not going to do that. Like, we're just listing these as our possibilities, but when I try to find it, we only need to find one, because after I find one, because it's a third degree, after I find one, I can factor it to find the last 2. So let's go ahead and try and test 1. Hopefully it'll work. So we're going to try 1. And what would be our 4 numbers that we're going to list across the top? 2, 11, -7, and -6. Go ahead and see if 1 will work. Now you always drop down this first number. The first number that you're going to bring down is a 2. So drop down the 2. Whatever the first number is, you just drop it down. Nothing happens to that first number. And now you multiply that by 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. Put that under the 11. Add, you get 13. Then you take 13 times 1. Put that under -7. So 13 times 1 is 13. What's 13 minus 7? 6. 6 times 1 is 6. So we got lucky because the first one worked. So we already got one of our answers. Our first answer is 1. So this is a quadratic. This is A, this is B, this is C. So go ahead and factor this down. 2x squared plus 13x plus 6. So you would need to find 2 numbers that multiply to be 2 times 6, which is 12, and add to 13. So go ahead, take a minute, try to factor it, and solve it to get the last 2. Now for this one, you do need to make a box because A is 2. So the 2x squared would go here. The 6 would go here. So take a minute, try to finish factoring that down, and then we'll end there. What are the numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 13? Who got 12 and 1 for their 2 numbers? Okay, good. So you put your 12x and your 1x. Now you're going to take out your GCFs. So for this first row, that would be a 2x. The bottom row is a 1. This first column is a x. And what would be the GCF of this column? 6. So now set both of those equal to 0. X plus 6 equals 0. 2x plus 1 equals 0. So you should get x equals -6, which was one of our possibilities. And you should also have x equals -1/2, which was one of our possibilities. So my final 2 answers are -6 and -1/2. So those are my zeros. So let's go ahead and write those as ordered pairs and also write it in factor form. So your zeros written as ordered pairs would be negative, I'm writing at the top left corner because I'm running out of space. Oh, sorry, it's not negative 1, it's positive 1, 0. Negative 6, 0. Negative 1 half, 0. And the order that you write these doesn't matter. Like, you don't have to write them in this particular order. In my factored form, so we started off by talking about the difference between factor form and standard form, would be f of x equals. So what would be my factor? If I have a 0 of 1, would my factor be x plus 1 or x minus 1? X minus 1. If you take x minus 1 and set that equal to 0, you get x plus 1. And then your factor form, you can just get that from when you factored it. So you had 2x plus 1 as a factor and x plus 6 as a factor. And that would be your solution.